Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Can I Say Something podcast. I'm your host, Damien, and today on the show, I have one of my favorite book critics working today, Evan from Book Reviews, TikTok, and podcast. Welcome, Evan.
Hey there, how's it going?
Pretty good, man, pretty good. So I am a TikTok browser of that of that app, and I've been reading pretty consistently for the last 3 or 4 years. I'm getting back into it. But I noticed your TikTok, in terms of like reviewing books, it's one of my favorites because you do a thing which is you just get to the point. Just get straight to the freaking point. It's that old trope of, you go to the website for the recipe, right? And the person's always like, when I was growing up on the farm 20 years ago, my Mima and Papa used to, show me how to do this recipe. And she's like, get to the point. Just please get to the recipe, And so you get to the point very quickly, which is great. How long have you been on TikTok?
I've only been on for about 6 months, maybe 7 months.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. And it's going pretty well for you, right?
It's going way better than I thought it would. Oh, sorry. Hang on a second. It's going way better than I thought it was going to. When I first started it, I don't know. Like I tried doing some other stuff on the internet, and I never really seemed to grab that following. Yeah. But things just started going really well immediately. I think it might have been because I took that approach. I was just getting straight into the review. Yeah. I only have a minute to talk, so.
Yeah, it's a very interesting format on there. So have you always been a heavy reader? Have you always been into books?
When I was a kid, I definitely was for a long time. And then in my kind of later teens, I definitely dropped it for video games. Just kind of playing a lot of video games. And then I was playing music for a long time too, so video games and music were definitely keeping a lot of my attention up until like my early 20s. And then for some reason, I think it was because I read Name of the Wind and I read the King Killer books and then Song of Ice and Fire just in rapid succession. And I was just like really poor and living in, I had just moved to Portland from Bend, Oregon, to play music, and did it without a job and no money or anything. So I just couldn't go do anything, and I didn't really have any friends here. So I just started reading again because I knew that I liked it. And yeah, just Song of Ice and Fire and King Killer just got me right back into that really juicy reading space that I was in when I was a kid. Yeah. And I had obviously read other stuff in between those years, but I've been pretty heavy on it actually since I'm 31 right now. So I've been pretty heavy on it since about 22, 23.
Yeah, nice. What were some of your favorite? You said the Song of Ice and Fire was something that you remember reading as a kid. What were some of your favorite authors? I think did you say you're a King guy? Oh yeah, huge Stephen King fan. Which is funny because I didn't start reading Stephen King until I was maybe like 23. Yeah, 22 or 23. My parents read Stephen King all the time, but I kind of chalked him up to like the John Grishams and Dean Koontzes and Michael Connellys and stuff. And not that those are bad authors, but I thought that he's so prolific. How could it be good? Yeah. Which is kind of it's a weird connection to make, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's a little, but no, I know what you're saying because I read a lot of his books, and I read was it Only Good Indians just recently, and I thought it was going to be more of Cormac McCarthy, sort of very dark, brooding, that sort of Blood Meridian type of tone, but it was more Stephen King. He has that very, not formulaic, but it's sort of like just, I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Like he does so many, and it just has that sort of like rhythm to it that you just know this is a Stephen King book, right?
Yeah, I think Stephen King has a tendency to really dig into characters.
Yes.
Like he focuses on minutiae that from other authors might not be as interesting. But right. I think Stephen Graham Jones, especially in The Only Good Indians, did a really good job with that too. Focusing, like really zooming in on like these kind of minute details that you're like, I don't know if this is really important, but it is. It is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So who are the other guys, who are the other people on TikTok and YouTube that you yourself go to for book reviews?
I was listening to a lot of Daniel Green for a long time.
Right.
Daniel Green is really great. I was listening to not really book reviews, I guess, but like ContraPoints and Lindsay Ellis were both kind of big influences on me as far as kind of that kind of like video essay type series, you know, where
Yeah.
I'm getting kind of deeper into what I like about stuff or what I don't like about stuff.
Yep.
And then TikTok, Brandon Baker is someone that I latched onto kind of quickly. I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff.
No.
Yeah, Baker reads. Brandon Baker. He does a lot of horror and thriller type stuff, but just he reads so many. Like it's funny because you know, a lot of people comment and they say like, "Wow, you read a lot," and then it's like you look at some of these other TikTokers and they're putting away 6-7 books a week.
Yeah.
Which is just absolutely ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's like gosh, it's funny. Like on TikTok, I can never remember like what people's names are. Like
Yeah.
like now it's like I just see their face.
Right.
And now I know. But yeah, gosh, I'm trying to think. There's like Hannah Bob is really great.
Okay.
Easy Cat. I really love Easy Cat a lot. Kevin T. Norman is another really good one. Geez, I need to make a video or something.
Yeah, outlining all these guys. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned like the you know, people that read so much and things like that. You know, I have that, you know, that feeling too, watching people that, you know, watch a lot of movies and TV shows, and it's just like, how do you literally have time? How do you literally have time to watch all these movies and TV shows and comment really well on them? You know, it's just sometimes I just don't know how people do it.
My if you really want to know my secret, it's that I don't really do anything else.
Yeah.
I think that if you asked a lot of other people too, that's kind of. Obviously, like I really love playing video games. I love watching TV and stuff. There's a lot of shows that I've been meaning to get to, but yeah, reading. I mean, reading doesn't take as much time as I feel that it. You know, it has a reputation as being this like really, really time consuming thing, and I think you can chip away at like a book a week at a pretty easy pace.
Yeah.
You know, like 50 books a year is like not totally wild, but when you get up into you're trying to read. I'm reading 4 books at the same time right now, and
wow.
I'm putting away like 3 or 4 a week, and then that really starts to, you know, because I think like the normal reading pace is about like a page a minute, depending on the amount of, you know, the margins and the amount of words on the page and stuff and the font or whatever.
Yeah.
So a 300-page book takes, would that be 5 hours?
Right.
Yeah.
So. With that, let me ask you. I started reading, quote unquote, reading at my overnight job. I listen to audiobooks a lot. Is that, you know, I've talked to my friends and like, that's not reading. You're just listening. You're having somebody read the thing to you. What's your thoughts on is audiobook listening? Is that reading?
Absolutely. Without question.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to, even if you set aside that's, you know, like ableist, yeah, because there's some people that can't see,
right?
So yeah, it's like, why would you tell somebody that? Yeah, anyway. But aside from that, I mean, you are retaining. I mean, just as like when you read a book, do you retain every single sentence? No. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, are you able, if someone quotes something at you, are you able to tell them what page it was on?
Right.
I mean, I think it's, you know, it's just like. At best, it's kind of silly, and at worst, it's like needless elitism that the community doesn't need.
Right.
It's already got enough of it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's but then you get the whole thing of like, you know, is the author good? Does the author read it well? Is he putting, you know, accents where he doesn't need to be? Is he doing the female voices too, you know, high pitch, things like that? It really depends on the author. Really, yeah. You know, Anthony Bourdain did Kitchen Confidential himself. You know, certain authors, certain readers are narrators are better than others, so it definitely depends on that as well. So it's a crapshoot, not just in terms of the quality of the book itself, but also the quality of the narrator. So you actually have another layer of, you know, am I going to enjoy this because of this this variable too? So that's the thing to look out for. Yeah.
No, I mean, there's some narrators that I honestly like can't stand, and that kind of ruin the experience for me. And I won't name them, but but like I do. I think the way that I use audiobooks is if I have like a credit on Audible and I'm reading something really long, like a long, like I think I tackled This Stand by reading it physically and listening to it on audiobook. Okay. And it kind of helps sometimes when you're reading something it's a little more dense or a little long. It kind of helps to break it up into different mediums.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, audiobooks are really good for that. And sometimes, you know, if I'm like, sometimes I'll like throw on something like really grindy, like Borderlands or like Diablo or something.
Right.
Something I can kind of like get into that kind of visual flow state with, and then listen to an audiobook, and it kind of helps me focus a little bit.
Right. Yeah. I'm halfway through the Wheel of Time books, and Kate Reading and Michael Kramer are very, very good at reading those books. So that's always helpful.
Yeah, I think that the Wheel of Time books, I wouldn't have been able to read those without the audiobooks.
Yes.
Personally.
Yes. Yeah. Did you watch the show?
I did. Yeah, the whole first season.
Yeah. What'd you think?
It's pretty good. I mean, I agree with, or if not agree, I mean, I understand what Brandon Sanderson said about it being like its own turning of the wheel. I thought that was a nice way to put it.
Right.
There are some changes that I think were really, really good calls. And it kind of expedited a lot of the delivery of the information that the watcher needed.
Sure.
But there were also, it's not necessarily like the content of the show didn't bother me, but it was like the delivery. I felt that the tone of the whole show was just super off for me. It was everything was so serious and dramatic and intense and it didn't matter what the conversation was. So it kind of like homogenized all of the intensity and brought it all down for me. Yeah. So like there were no peaks and valleys. It was all just, as soon as this episode starts, it's just like the most intense thing you've ever heard. and it kept that going throughout the entire episode, and the whole series. But I mean, you know, I'm being a little hypercritical, but it's just when I read The Wheel of Time, and I've read the series twice, it's like,
oh wow,
the characters from the Two Rivers have such a camaraderie, you know, and I feel like they just didn't really capture it in the show. They went straight to them just being like these disaffected, like intense, brooding, hot people. I mean, that's how you sell TV shows, I guess, but not how you sell The Wheel of Time.
Exactly.
What do you think?
I have similar feelings about it. I think the draw for me for the books, like you said, was the character building, the relationships, the interpersonal relationships between the characters, all the experiences they went through. I think so much of the first books is just them just trying to survive together and what they have to do to survive, and all of the, you know, different people they meet along the way, and how, you know, the fear of the dark friends, if they think you're a dark friend, that has so much, you know, allegory for today. And it's just like you said, it was the character building, it was the world building, but it was mostly just the amount of time you spend with all of these characters lends itself to such a deep and intimate understanding of the characters themselves, and that just does not translate to a visual medium at all, because, you know, relationship building on screen isn't sexy, like you said.
Well, and I mean, to me, like, because these books are so long, you're kind of doomed to failure to at least a certain extent trying to get these over to screen.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, like, the whole show just kind of felt like a kind of stock fantasy show with Wheel of Time terms attached to it, which is, you know, it's not, I believe me, like, I've watched way worse, way worse shows than that. But it's just like, me being as hypercritical as I am is coming from having spent so much, like, hours and hours and hours with, you know, so it's like, I think I'm a little bit biased in that I had already kind of pictured everything the way I wanted it. And of course they're not going to deliver on that, because they weren't making it for me in particular.
Right.
But I did just watch, I'm almost done with the first season of The Witcher.
Yep.
And that is a way better show. Like that. But I haven't read the books, so that is kind of telling, right? Like, it's like, I like The Witcher so much more than I like the Wheel of Time show, but I haven't read the Witcher books, so maybe I ruined the Wheel of Time for myself.
It seems like to me the Witcher TV show was, I don't know, it seemed like they took more time to understand the medium and how to translate, you know, the book and the game into that medium. I feel like the show, they must have taken so much time to craft how the narrative was going to be told, because, you know, for those that haven't seen it, it is a very sort of, you know, cuts back and forth in the timeline, and it jumps forward and backwards quite frequently. So, you know, I feel like they must have, you know, gone to the writing board multiple times to figure out how to actually make that show the way it is.
Yeah, and there was a lot. It does feel like there's a lot more care being put into it, but I mean, you know, I'm not making the show. Like, I don't know. I don't know what they're, and, you know, I mean, Netflix maybe has a different approach to what their standards are, or what,
Yeah.
like what kind of show, maybe they shopped the Wheel of Time script to Netflix, and Netflix was like, like we don't really want this on our platform, and then Amazon was all over it.
Yeah.
I don't know. You never really know. It's easy to sit back. I mean, I've never tried making a TV show or anything. I've tried I make podcasts and I write my own books and stuff, and like that's a pain in the ass. So
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that must be like. But it does just, overall, as a fan of the show, it's just kind of like, well, fell a little flat.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they made it though.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So getting back to books, this is something I just added recently to the outline, because I was thinking about Cormac McCarthy, and he's probably the best writer I've read so far. I've in the past few years. When you read a really good book that just knocks you on your ass, do you find it difficult to then move on to something else? Do you give the next couple things a lower grade than you normally would because the thing you just read was so amazing?
It depends on so. A good example is I just read Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman.
Yeah.
And that book was just a knockout. I don't rate my books on a number scale really,
right.
But or the books I read, I should say, on a number scale. But if I was rating them on a number scale, Between Two Fires would be a 10 out of 10. It's one of the most inspired things I've ever read.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. I couldn't stop thinking about it when I wasn't reading it. And then when I was done, I picked up Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which is a way different book.
Yes.
Right. So that's kind of my trick, is if because I can feel that feeling coming on where I'm like, the next book I read is better be as good as this one. But I find that if you kind of like change up the genre, then your expectations will change along with it. They won't necessarily be lower, but they'll be different.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, because I have felt like that before. I mean, I remember like reading the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. And then I tried reading Tad Williams' Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which is the first book is called The Dragonbone Chair. It's a really famous series, really well regarded. But after finishing something that was such a gut punch like Joe Abercrombie, and then switching to something like a more slow burn epic fantasy, it wasn't the right transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read the based on your recommendation, Song of Achilles, really, really incredible. Also, Between Two Fires, I read. Just you're absolutely. They knocked me on my ass as well. And then I went to changed up completely. I just saw Drive My Car, which is based off the Murakami short story. So I read that. Men Without Women is the name of the short story collection. And then I went to Child of God by Cormac McCarthy. So just like
whoa, did you just read Child of God?
Yeah, I just did it. Yeah, just the other day.
Oh, so did I.
Oh, really?
That is so wild that I just finished Child of God like 4 days ago.
I did as well. Yeah.
What are the odds?
Yeah. I'm trying to go through McCarthy's collection there. Yeah, just like you said, a wild contrast in themes and just violence just comes at you out of nowhere. Again, the Blood Meridian is still at the top of my list as far as things I've read in the past 18 months, but Child of God seems much more nihilistic than Blood Meridian, much more just meandering, but not in a bad way, but just what would you think of it?
Child of God was the first Cormac McCarthy I'd ever read, actually.
Oh, really?
I was. They wanted us to read The Crossing in school, and I never read any of the books in school.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just didn't care. Even though I'm sure The Crossing would have been good.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't have got it anyway. I was dumb when I was like 16. But So Child of God, one of my friends just lent it to me, and I usually am so bad about reading stuff that people lend to me because my TBR is just ridiculous. Yeah. But it's such a short book, and I wanted to just like this one time, like read a book somebody lent me with it in something resembling a timely manner. So I started it. I just laid down and started it and didn't put it down until I finished it. I read it in one sitting, or I got up at some point, but I loved it. I thought it took me a little bit to kind of get into the groove of his writing. Yeah. Because it is so like there's not a wasted word in there. And I'm so used to reading kind of like these big giant books or not saying you don't have to focus on those books, but it's just you can kind of skim some paragraphs when someone's like walking through a door outside and then they're walking down the street, and you kind of know what they're what's going on. But with McCarthy, right. I felt like I really need to sit there and chew on everything. And I don't know if this is like a trend in any of his other books, but kind of humanizing somebody that is the worst. Right.
Yes.
And it really, to me, it really like asks that question, like, at what point are you kind of on a road that you're not going to come back from? Yeah. Right. Like, I mean, how ostracized can you be from society before like you're not, it's like, we can't even like rehabilitate somebody.
Yeah.
And I remember, I finished that. For our listeners here, don't read Cormac McCarthy in January in the Northern Hemisphere. I had to go to the store. I don't have a car, so I walked. I walked, a few blocks down to the store, and it was like really windy and rainy and gross outside. And I'm just like staring at the ground, like in silence, like after I finished it, because it definitely made me ask a lot of questions about how we treat people and how we observe people, and I think one of the genius things that I noticed about that book is that it's like, he's doing all these awful, awful things, right?
Yes.
But his situation is getting gradually worse as the things he's doing is getting worse. And there's like 2 moments in the book, and they're very short, but where he's crying, right? And it's just that those parts hurt to read the most, because it's like he's not 100% aware, maybe, of like the gravity of what his situation is, but he does know that it's really, really bad.
Yeah.
And it really just made me think like, oh, like to be in this situation. It's kind of like, did you ever watch that movie, The Revenant?
Yes.
I will never watch that movie again because I was so uncomfortable. It's an amazing movie, but that feeling when you're just like, okay, that's enough for me. I get it. And you really feel for this person. And, like obviously the name of the book, Child of God, is a perfect name for the book.
Yeah. Very evocative. Yep. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. It takes a very talented hand to, like you said, take a very extremely unlikable. I think that's gracious to call him unlikable, but it's just such a you have to try so hard and do so many things to make a character like that, sympathetic at all whatsoever. I was just watching this movie the other night called Boiling Point, which takes place. It takes place in one shot. It's about an hour and a half. Really well done, and every character, a lot of characters are just complete assholes and completely unlikable. But the writer and the director does, things with the script to make each person have their moment of redemption. So that's a really, really difficult thing when you have a character like that in Child of God, to make you even for a second have any sort of empathy for that character.
Absolutely. I mean, like, we all want to see a proactive, plucky, down on their luck character who's got a heart of gold. That's the main thing that I feel like a lot of people write. But then McCarthy does like this. He gets down and dirty with it. He's like, all right, here's the worst example of somebody. This is somebody that all of society could get behind and say, we hate this person. This is the absolute worst. But they're not seeing the moments where he's sitting in the mud crying. In what he's doing, it is really bad, obviously. And I did notice one really interesting thing was that the way, I'm not trying to spoil anything, but like the way that his story kind of wraps up when he's being observed, when his cadaver kind of is like being observed by the medical staff. I thought that was like really, really, really brilliant. Just that he's still the objectification and dehumanization. Like even his ending is, just medicalized. It's so good. I got that book. It's so wild how somebody can write something that just hurts. It was like poetry,
Yes. Yeah, it was. Exactly. Great way to put it. It's very. McCarthy's prose is so poetic and so painterly with the way he describes scenarios. I would highly recommend Blood Meridian if you liked Child of God.
Yeah, this year I'm planning on reading Blood Meridian and The Road this year, but I think I'm going to wait for the Sun to come out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So let me see here. I listen to a lot of movie podcasts, TV podcasts. Trying to start diving into book podcasts. I'm listening to yours. It's really well done. What other do you listen to other book podcasts? And if you do, what other ones do you recommend?
I haven't listened to one single book podcast. Wait, no.
I haven't either.
I'm misspeaking. I listened to 10 Very Big Books. That was the one that I did listen to quite a bit when I was reading the Malazan books by Stephen Erickson. And I only made it through a few of those books, but they do that was like what I modeled. Because like half of my podcast is recapping and like a read along that people can join in on retroactively or, in real time while we're reading them. And then the other half is just picking a topic and discussing something with Chad. But the recap episodes I modeled basically exactly like the 10 Very Big Books thing, where they do a little bit of an intro and then they do a synopsis and then they talk about it. And then there's another synopsis and then they talk about it. And so that was, I mean, even if the people from 10 Very Big Books, like, thank you for giving me the perfect template because I think I would have been lost without that. But the way that they did it was really excellent. But that was the only one I really listened to because I don't really, and I didn't do this with TikTok either. I'm not saying like this is a genius way to do things, but like if I get into a mode where I'm comparing what I'm doing to anyone else, I get discouraged. And I get too lost in the weeds and try to make it as good as something else. And like I'll learn the fundamentals of how to do it, so I figured out I needed a pop filter for my microphone and I need, to figure out how to record separate tracks for a conversation. I figured all that stuff out, but I wasn't like, why is this podcast so good? Because it's good because they made it good in ways that I'll never understand, and it helps a lot.
Yeah.
It's easy to get discouraged.
Absolutely. It is. It really is. I've done my podcast for about 3 years, and it's going okay. I'm just still trying to reach out. I'm just starting to, sort of like reach out to other creators and other, different outlets and trying to do some writing, article wise. So yeah, I'm just trying to get a toehold in the industry, I guess you would call it. So yeah, it's going interestingly, I guess.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, are you doing do you do edits? Are you editing stuff?
Well, yeah, I pretty much just record, edit. You mean the podcast, podcast audio?
Yeah. So are you editing the podcast audio? Yeah. That's a whole other thing. Editing. I remember.
For anybody starting out, distributing your podcast, go to Anchor. Anchor is a fantastic thing. I don't get paid by them. Actually, I kind of do. They have this thing where it's like you put an ad at the beginning of the episode and they would give you like, don't do drunk driving things like that. But also Anchor was their own ad that plays at the beginning of my podcast. But Anchor, you literally drag and drop your finished podcast into their service and it puts it on everything, literally everything. Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, all of that stuff gets put on there. So I'd highly recommend if you're just starting out, you don't know, I think distribution is probably the hardest part about that, the hardest that it used to be. But now if you just use Anchor, it's literally drag and drop and it uploads in a few minutes. So I'd highly recommend doing that. But yeah, to answer your question, I do edit it. I, started it. I do the scripting. I do the, everything, marketing, I guess you'd call it. But posting the link on Twitter, if that's marketing, then I do the marketing for it too as well. So
marketing. Yeah, I remember. When I recorded the first couple episodes with Chad, my partner, and I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and start editing this now. And I had like an hour long, an hour of audio, and I started editing, and I was just like, oh. And it took me like, I think the first hour of audio that I had that I got down to like half an hour, it took me like 4 hours. Yeah. But now I've streamlined it quite a bit and I kind of figured it out. But it still takes forever, because you like what we were talking about before, you get into kind of like, you get a little neurotic with it. You're like, did he breathe like really loudly right there? Is it way too loud of a breath? Did he, and stuttering and interrupting each other. And because one thing that I did figure out about, and I'm glad I figured this out kind of early on, is that especially when you're, if you're doing a solo podcast, it's whatever. But if you're talking to somebody else, a conversation between two people that is just the two of us sounds different than a conversation that someone else is listening to. Right. So it's like somebody listening to two people talking, like when I interrupt you, you know that I'm interrupting. Yeah. It's like this mutual like thing where I get the idea of what you're saying and you get the idea of what I'm saying. But when someone's listening and someone interrupts you, it's like really off-putting. So getting that kind of early was good. And I do listen to a lot of.
Oh no, I was just gonna say for the editing podcast, for the editing stuff, it's pretty streamlined. Like you said, I streamline my stuff pretty early, but I do a best of the year show, so I like to add in clips from the movies we're talking about and TV shows we're talking about, and that's just a whole layer of work and drudgery that I just inflict on myself every year. So.
but it's really fun. I mean, like I record my own music and stuff for the podcast. I record. I have my own music projects that I do solo too. So I'm like pretty familiar with Logic Pro. But it is really cool to like, you get like this mishmash of conversation and it kind of doesn't sound super great. And then you chop it up, you get it together, you put some compression on it, do the EQ, get the music on the intro and the outro. And it's like, all right, now this is sounding like a podcast. And I get, like my drug of choice is, creative projects and seeing them through. And so the fact that like anybody's even listening to it and giving me good feedback is just so cool. Cause obviously it's a lot of unpaid labor, or if it is paid, it's like you're getting cents per hour, and hopefully it's not, hopefully it's, picks up and get some good advertisements. And cause we use Podbean, which is pretty good. It's definitely been frustrating. I just, when I first started, I was just like, I don't know what I didn't, because that's one other thing that I do too when I'm starting this kind of stuff is I won't listen to other podcasts, but I will dig in and like on Reddit and like forums and stuff and see like what the best possible thing to do is for every situation. And nobody has an answer. Yeah. Right. It's like, it's like everybody on the internet was like, Podbean is the best. I use it all the time. And then the comment right under it's just like, Podbean is garbage. Don't use it. So then it's just a wash. So I eventually just have to like pick something. But that is one of the cool, if I could offer any advice at all to anybody that's starting this kind of stuff or TikTok page or an Instagram or you're putting music out or whatever, just put it out. Just like it will get better. Like there's not going to be 10,000 people listening to the first thing you ever do. Like just get it out. It's not going to be great, but if you sit around trying to make it perfect, it's never going to be perfect. And then 2 years is going to go by and you'll be no closer to having anything out, cause then once you got it out and some people are interacting with it, then you get a fire lit under your ass, and then you're like, oh, cool. Okay. So now I need to figure this out. And you're motivated. So that's my advice.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice. Just do it and just do the thing. So one last question before we get to some of the books from last year. If you could inject books, movies, TV shows into your brain, would you do it? Or is the experience of, reading the thing or listening to it, is that what makes it so impactful for you?
I looked at all these questions and, 1 through 8, I was like, I know the answer to this, but I have to ask you a question in response to this question. Sure. Do I get to do both?
Yes.
Like, oh, okay, then yeah, fuck yeah. Like, of course, I would definitely, like, if I had the option, like, because, dude, some of these books are so long. I mean, like, and I love reading. I love books so much, but, it's like, I'm going to read The Expanse this year. I know, and Chad and I are going to do it on the podcast. It's going to be this whole thing, but like, man, I would really love to be able to just pump out episodes of the podcast in a couple days just because I got to download, that would be really great. Yeah. But obviously the experience of reading in and of itself is really great. Like, holding the book, seeing the craft in your hands. But yeah, I mean, like we were talking about before, like we got stuff going on. we got other commitments and stuff, reading does take up a pretty decent amount of time. And, I would definitely. What about you?
I would as well. Like you said, there's so many fantasy series are very, very long, but just to get them into you, just to be like, yes, I've read that. I understand it. I can move on now with my life after that.
I bet you're feeling like that with the Wheel of Time.
The Wheel of Time, exactly. I have like 7 more to go. Yeah. So it's just like, just get me through that. I've heard, the quality of it dips, around book 8 or 9. Was that your feeling about it too?
So like the thing with the Wheel of Time, You're on, what are you on, like Lord of Chaos right now, number 6?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
So yeah, Lord of Chaos like wraps up really well, and then Crown of Swords is pretty
Yes.
cool. Path of Daggers and Winter's Heart and Crossroads of Twilight are, yeah, like really really rough. But I think that I have like a theory on that because I didn't really notice it that much when I was reading them. And I think that maybe the reason that they were so rough is because when, like, I think there was a pretty decent gap between those books coming out, right? Like they were coming out like every year, and then there was a bigger gap between those ones. So I think it was just kind of exacerbated. Like it was made to feel a lot worse because not a lot happens in Crossroads of Twilight. So by the time people got it, they had already raised their expectations, and then their expectations were just not met because, you know, that's what happens when, you know, like Patrick Rothfuss. I feel so bad for him because nobody's gonna like his third book, right? Like too much time has gone by, and I, you know, it's like no matter what he puts out, no one's gonna be happy with it, even if it's really good.
Right.
At least that's my theory on it. So I think that with the Wheel of Time, it's like it depends on, you know, I personally think that by the 8th, 9th, 10th book, you're already so invested in these characters and what's going on that you're kind of just in like this flow state with it. They're walking around, they're walking into rooms, talking to each other, tugging on their skirts, you know, like, you know, Nynaeve is tugging on her braid. Like it's a lot of descriptions of like, I think in Crossroads of Twilight, there's this one part where it's like 5 pages of like describing this like tea service, you know, just ridiculous. But by that time in the series, it's, you know, you're friends with all these people, you know, it's like it's like a vibe. I like to look at it as like a vibe check.
Exactly. So let me talk to you about the best books you read last year. So I saw your you know, TikTok of the best fantasy stuff last year. What are some of like the other books that you really felt strongly about from last year?
And let me pull up my list real quick. Give me a second.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem. The thing about the Wheel of Time is I'm really the Shang-Chen seem like a force that they keep teasing, and it seems like is the Shang-Chen going to be like the big battle at the end, or one of the big battles near the end of the series?
Without spoiling anything, we would like not really, but it's I mean, honestly, man, like the last those last couple of books were like I cried. I was like, the first time I read A Memory of Light was I have like really vivid memories of reading that book, and I was listening to like really emotional, like epic music while I was reading, because the whole Memory of Light is just one big giant battle, right? It's just starts and doesn't stop, and it's really long, and it's so worth it. But the Shan-Chan, it's like it's a part of a much bigger situation, you know, and that's like why those books are so brilliant, is because it's like there isn't like this one, even like the Dark One isn't like it's the main big bad, but there are huge situations going on like everywhere. It is one of the most epic last books in a series ever. Like I was reading it, I was like on tour with a band that I used to play in, and I was like in the van, like they were all, you know, screwing around and listening to music and smoking and stuff, and like I'm in the back seat just like crying over this big giant fantasy book. By the time it was like one of the, you know, I felt cool, but you know, they didn't think it was very cool. But it's just, you know, by the time you get to book 14 of a series, right? Like when everything is culminating, and you know, you are saying goodbye to people, and it's so rough, you know, because like it really is just dozens and dozens of hours. This is not a 300-page book that you really liked, you know, and you know, I've read 300-page books that have made me cry, but damn, man, and the last few books that Brandon Sanderson wrote are worth the slog in the middle, you know. Just keep going with it, because I mean, Crown of Swords is really good. There's a lot of Matt in Crown of Swords. You'll like Crown of Swords a lot. Let me see here. Okay, so best books that I read. So you want to know like books that I didn't list on the TikTok video, maybe? Or
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the ones that really hit me hard last year was I finally read Ted Ching's short stories that included the stories of your life, the one that was the Rival was based off of. That was very
Totally.
good. Yeah, the one there called, I think it was Understand. It was basically like Limitless, the movie Limitless. It was like that, but it was very, very interesting to. It's always interesting when an author has to describe what's going on in somebody's head, feelings or thoughts, or just very abstract, hard to quantify, what's going on in somebody's head. They do this thing basically. I don't know. Have you read the? You said you read the story.
I haven't read the Ted Chiang stuff. It's on my shelf right now. I have like a really cool British copy of it. But yeah, I haven't gotten to it yet. But
Nice.
yeah, everybody keeps telling me how brilliant Ted Chiang is.
Yeah, because it's just this thing of like trying to describe communication between two people who have ascended the human consciousness and are communicating with like clicks and beeps and stuff like that. But it's really well done. It's really interesting. I always think about like people are two people are talking just like we are now, and it's like how much faster could communication be if we didn't have to like one person talks and the other person stops and waits and processes the information, and in that book, it's basically what I got away from it anyway was, they make a beep and this other person like comprehends everything they just said so quickly that they can actually talk before the other person. Is just this really cool like verbal dance they do. It's a very, very interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, how much would that? I mean, if you think about like how much like cell phones have impacted like third world countries and stuff, it's like how much more would that impact our society if we could all communicate with each other even like that much more instantaneously? Because communication is one of the biggest barriers to any kind of progress.
Yeah,
kind of reminds me of
absolutely.
like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when they have the point of view gun, where you shoot somebody with it and it immediately gets their point of view across to you so that you can understand them.
Yeah.
It's like, how useful would that be in relationships?
Yeah. They did a similar idea. I think it was in the second Hank Green book, was the absolutely remarkable thing, where I think the main antagonist, I forget what his name was, but he was basically putting people in a room and putting a thing in their head, and they would go to sleep, or their consciousness was like uploaded to a computer, and you could then inhabit their body and you could feel everything they were feeling and hear all their thoughts and basically get the world from their perspective. So you're right. That's a very interesting idea.
I remember back when I was playing music a lot more, we did like this benefit show for Tom's. Have you heard of that company, the shoe company?
No.
Oh, they do they're like a charity type like shoe company. Anyway, they had in their big warehouse, they had this like VR setup, and I went and checked it out, and it was VR of like third world countries, right? And so like their whole mission behind that was like it's kind of like what you were just saying. It's like they were trying to at least like put you down in some awful situation. And so you could at least have some empathy or sympathy and like sit there and like look at just how run down some of these places are, and at least get that kind of, at least to some people, be like, look, this is how bad it actually is. Like, you never think about this, right? Because in your day to day, everything works and you have running water, and but then like now here's a virtual reality experience of what it's like to like live in this situation. So. Yeah, that's it's kind of wild how science fiction overlaps, Go ahead.
One thing I would recommend, just as like a short little not fantasy or sci-fi, very weird book called Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. It was I don't even want to get into it, just not even spoil anything about it, but it was one of those just like, holy shit, that that thing's been happening this entire time, and just completely recontextualizes the entire book once you realize what the reveal is. Just completely blew me away.
Ooh, it's a thriller.
Thriller, exactly. That's the right word for it. Yep. I also really enjoyed, Midnight Library was one of those that's like on. I can imagine like Oprah recommending it. It's book by Matt Haig. It's about a woman who attempts suicide and goes to this sort of like purgatory place where there's just all of these different avenues that the person lets her go down, and sort of like that idea of what if you made this choice at this age, and what if you went down this career path, or if you got married or didn't get married, and she sort of is allowed to, test out and see which, how each road would have affected her life individually. So it's a very interesting book.
Yeah, I heard a lot about the Midnight Library. That's kind of one of those things that I probably should have jumped on when it was really popular on Book Talk. But I mean, I'm still going to read it, obviously. But sometimes I strike while the iron's hot and get those view counts up, baby.
That's an interesting question I wanted to ask you. This reminded me of what, like, when people film critics or TV critics, they have to, like you said, jump on the thing while it's hot. That while a show is airing on TV or a movie is in theaters, they always have to review it as soon as possible before people forget about it. Do you have that pressure for you to review a book when it comes out, or when it's hot, or when people are talking about when it's in the zeitgeist? Basically, do you feel the pressure to read a book and review it as soon as possible?
I mean, not if my curiosity is not piqued. I mean, well, everybody was talking about like A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I hopped on that because I was just I've never read any fantasy romance before, and this seems to be a good starting point. So, so it's like a mixture of both. It's like I'm not going to lie and say that I don't want to jump on stuff when it's popular, because I do want more eyes on what I'm doing, because I've got other platforms that I'm trying to get people involved with. But I'm not going to go out of my way and read something that I think I'll actively dislike, just because it's popular. But I mean, I wouldn't say like there's a lot of pressure, but I think another cool thing that I'm starting to realize is I think that a lot of people like that I'm kind of just reviewing random stuff every now and then too, that they've never heard of or it isn't being talked about very much, and it is nice to not operate under that pressure, because there's a ton of stuff that I want to read that's not being talked about, and I'm not going to not read it. Like, I just read Revival by Stephen King, and like nobody cares about a 2014 Stephen King book. Like, nobody gives a shit about that book. Like, and I realized that, like, because it's like, I mean, Stephen King, like the really popular Stephen King stuff was written in like the 70s and 80s, like the really, really, really classic stuff. And so, when you're reading like post 2000 Stephen King, like stuff that's like hasn't been made into a TV show and nobody really cares, it's like you're not going to get a lot of views on that. But I'm not doing this solely for views. It's like one of my main missions in in reading books and recommending them to people is like I do want people to be able to branch out if they want to and read stuff that they might not otherwise have read. Like The Fisherman by John Langan was one of my absolute favorite reads last year. I had never read anything like that. It was so incredible. And I think Brandon Baker, the person that I had recommended earlier, I think he was like the only other person that it was talking about it. And I was so excited to have a platform to tell people about it. And that's like one of the really cool things is at least, having a decent amount of followers. It's like, oh, I just finished this amazing book. Now I can get like 20 or 30 people on board with this and, like throw some more money John Langan's way. Because it's like some people don't I research this stuff all day, right? Like, I mean, I'm in and out of forums, like, checking out like what people are into and, maybe some picks that people were sleeping on and didn't know, like some unhidden or some hidden gems, but not everybody has time to do that. Like, I don't have kids. I don't have a very demanding job. I'll take that. I'll take the mantle.
So for you, getting the TikTok going and getting these different outlets going pretty successfully, do you feel like are you reaching out to other like outlets? Are you like, because I'm applying to like do freelance writing work? Are you doing that sort of thing, or are you thinking about just building your own thing from the ground up?
It's mostly from the ground up. I mean, my plan, my vision is like I've got 3 manuscripts written, like books that I've written. They're still in the beta reading stages and stuff. I need to do rewrites and stuff, but this is all for my career as a fantasy author. Like
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, like I mean, I'm just trying to do it in the way where it's the most sincere. Like I'm not trying to just like boost numbers so that I can
Sure.
get people to buy books, but I want to engage with people and make a difference in people's lives in any way I can and stuff. But I mean, like I want to be able to go to an agent and say, hey, like we got 100 people that are down to buy this like right now. Just maybe it's not the best manuscript you've ever seen, but like we've got something going here. I mean, if we throw an editor my way, like let's try to get some work done. And and it's like I believe in my work enough that I might be able to get published or some kind of deal without that following. But like, why not take every advantage you can in this industry?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, like the podcast, I really love doing that, and like I would keep doing that even if I was publishing a bunch of books and stuff. But yeah, just and it's funny because like I might have painted myself into a corner here a little bit because if I do come out with, or when I do come out with books in the future, maybe people's expectations will be a little higher than I want them to be because I've read all these books, and so they'll be like, "Oh, this guy must really know his stuff," and then they're like, "Wow, this is garbage." So we'll see.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's the plan.
Gotcha. That sounds good. So yeah. One other thing I want to recommend to you, or wondering if you've read it, is "Tender is the Flesh" by Augustina Basterrica, I think is the person's name.
Oh man, I pretty much every time I do a live, which is once a week on Saturdays, people recommend that book to me. I just keep seeing it. I really need to pick it up. Like it's what is it about? Like I haven't even like really researched this. I haven't even really researched it.
It's basically a dystopian near future world where some bacteria has killed off all of the meat-giving animals, all cows, all chickens, everything has been completely contaminated. So they had to kill off all of the livestock in the world. There's no meat left for anybody to eat, but we still want to eat meat, right? Because that's the way we are. And so all of the meat processing plants then transform into people processing plants. So it's from the it's from the perspective of sort of a liaison between the processing plants and the people giving businesses, I guess you would call them. So it is from his perspective, and it is one of my the thing I would recommend this book for is because it is the prose is very reminiscent of Cormac McCarthy's prose. It's so picturesque and just paints such a beautiful picture with the way he describes things, which is a weird thing to say about a book that is essentially about cannibalism, but it is written in such a way that you get lost in the words and get lost in the prose and not so much what he's exactly writing about. So highly recommend that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I frequent I live in Portland, Oregon, so I frequent Powell's like quite a bit. It's like one of the biggest bookstores on the west or in the country, I think. And I work like 2 blocks away from there, so that's where all my money goes. But I was walking around there, and I looked in the horror section for it, and I couldn't find it. I thought maybe it was just sold out because it was so popular. But then I was walking past to leave, and the literature section, like the literary fiction section, is massive. It's the main part of the store. So I was like walking through there, and I saw it on one of the shelves in that section. So. I guess it's like like you said, it reads a little more literary fiction than horror, maybe. Yes,
it definitely does. It absolutely does. It doesn't put the violence and gore front and center. It's very much like he describes it in a way where it's like, wait, what did you just say? You're talking about killing people over and over again, but it's it's like, wait, oh, so you're talking about his head caving in. Okay, got you.
So is it like
catch that the way you described it?
Is it like a situation where people are like not consenting to this, or is it like a lottery system or something?
Yeah. It's basically like the people, the livestock, they call them heads in the book. It's where they're just the homeless, they're poor, they're destitute, they're old, they're disabled people. So it's that sort of thing.
I had it's funny you mentioned that. I had an idea for a book, and I'm probably never going to write this, but like I had an idea for a book where, like the elites, like the billionaire class, the top 1% are like rounding up homeless people and turning them into like gladiators. like that movie Gladiator. And I think I like started it once, and I was just like, I don't want to write this. like, I don't like, this is messed up, and I don't I think I got like 5,000 words into it or something, and I just like wasn't interested in fulfilling that.
Oh no.
But it's just made me think about that, like using like the bottom tier of society for that. That is really interesting to think about, though. It's like, I mean, you can draw different lines to it, but it's the idea that like the lower class is going to suffer through the rest of the country needing something. Kind of like with like the coronavirus pandemic, how it's like, we had like the essential workers, and after you kind of zoom out on that and you're like, oh, this is just poor people delivering food to rich people.
Yep.
Yeah, that was that's interesting. I'm definitely going to pick that up. I need to read that like this year, probably next month or something. Thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, no problem. It's I want to say it wasn't too long, so definitely you're not in that world for you're not in that headspace for very long, so that's a good thing.
Oh man, I've definitely had those books where like I like it a lot, but I can't wait to finish it. Like American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. Have you read that?
Yeah.
That is
I haven't yet.
That's a rough read. It's 500 pages, and it's, I don't know if you've seen the movie, the Christian Bale movie.
Yes, I have.
Okay, so it's like a lot worse than that. Like it is graphic. Really? It is really intense. But it's a brilliant book. I really like it a lot. But I remember being about 250 pages in and flipping to the last page, and it was like, I think it's like 500 pages long. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. This is so rough. And it doesn't help. Is Tender as the Flesh first person?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it's from the
first person is so brutal sometimes. Like when you're in someone's head, seeing all of that. Ugh.
Yeah. So I think we're about ready to wrap up. Is there anything else you wanted to mention as far as your podcast, your TikTok, anything you're going to be putting on in the future that you wanted to mention?
Do the old plug.
Yeah.
You can find me on TikTok at Book Reviews Kill, and the podcast is also called Book Reviews Kill. And I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Don't worry about the Twitter. Those are just my that's me live tweeting my Harry Potter marathon. Like not that wild. There's no content on the Twitter page. Yep, those are all of my avenues that you can find me on.
That's it.
That's
all the stuff.
If I want to plug this, it's the
Can I Say Something podcast.
Can I Say Something? So I got it confused because I'm doing another one tomorrow.
Nice.
Fairly similar. Yeah. This is a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thanks so much for coming on. Good luck in the future with all of that stuff, with your books and all that, and I look forward to hearing more reviews of books.
Really appreciate it. I'm gonna follow you on Spotify as well.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, get that word out of that stuff. All right. So for Can I Say Something, I've been Damien.
And I've been Evan.
And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.